It is great to be in Hyderabad. I first came to India in 1981. So just a quick raise of hands. How many people here were born after 1981? If you were born after 1981, raise your hand. Okay. So I have I have a little bit of experience on you. I think when I was here in 1981, I was actually working in Nepal. I think it was the year Infosys was founded, right? I mean, 1980, 1981. So I have a little bit of background here. I want to thank the ShermTech organizers, also my Deloitte partners, Gaurav Lahiri, and our partner team here for having us here. Of all the topics that I have the chance to talk about in the US and around the world, this topic, the future of work and the role of HR leaders, I think is the most interesting topic many of us have seen in our careers. And I literally can think of no better place in the world to have this discussion than in India at the ShermTech conference, right? Because the intersection of the people agenda and the technology agenda is the business agenda going forward. All right. Now we're going to ask you to do something that's a little bit unusual. We asked you to put your phones on mute, but we don't want you to turn them off. Right? We don't want you to look at them too much in the next 25 minutes. But we are going to be doing a couple of polling questions, and we're going to be using Slido. So if you can go to slido.com, the information's on the screen, have that ready, and then put in Deloitte Future of Work, and hopefully this will work. And we have 3 questions where we'll do a very quick poll of the team here so we can get your input. So turn on your phones. It's the opposite of what we used to say at meetings. We used to say turn off our phones. Go to slido.com and then go to Deloitte Future of Work. What I'm going to talk about this morning is where we are on the journey as HR and business leaders around the future of work. There's a lot of discussion around the future of work. And typically, when we talk about the future of work, we hear 1 or 2 stories. Unfortunately, the leading story is this negative story, is the fear story, right? It's summarized in the phrase, the robot apocalypse. The robots are coming, and they're going to take all of our jobs. Right? And we've been seeing this fear-mongering for quite some time. The flip side of this is that we're entering a new age, and this is going to be the age of unleashed human potential, of unleashed human imagination, and that we're going to have machines that will do, if not all, most of the drudgery of the work that that we need to take on, and that we have this unbelievably exciting future, right? Robot apocalypse, the unleashed workforce, right? Obviously, or at least it's obvious to me, right, that the future involves both of these truths together, right? There's an element of what people call the robot apocalypse. There's an element of what we call humanity unleashed, right? But the way that I would invite you to think about it, right, is as HR and business leaders, in the next 5 to 7 years, and I don't think it's going to be more than that, right? We and our fellow leaders and managers will in effect need to redesign every job in the world where we are working next to and with smart machines in everything that we do, right? Every worker and every workforce is going to be impacted by these technologies. It's not about losing jobs. It's about changing jobs, right? So again, I think the essential question for us, and I think the essential challenge, if there's one question I'd like you to write down and take away, is what is our story? What is the story at your company on the future of work? What is your future of work narrative? Is it a story of fear? Is it a story of possibility, right? Right? Are you reacting to what's happening, or are you planning and in an impactful way? Are you ready for what's coming on? So how do we actually wrap our minds around this? So what we're going to do over the next sort of hopefully 15, 18 minutes is I'm going to provide what we hope is a useful framework for not just thinking about the future of work, because the future of work is not something that is coming next year or the year after or the year after that. It's things that are happening right now. But how do you and how do we as HR and business leaders, how do we navigate in the future of work? Right? What steps do we take? So to start that, we need to create some common context. What is the future of work about? But as we're getting started, we're going to start with the first polling question. Right? So if you go, and this is where, is the polling question going to be here? No. So if we flip over to the first polling question, is that what we're going to do? Right. So the first polling question is, and if you're online, how well prepared are you for the future of work? And if we were really good teachers, I would ask you the same question at the end of the presentation, and we would see whether you were better prepared. But right now, when you think about your organization, right, would you consider yourself unprepared, prepared? You know, are you not even sure what the future of work is? Be honest, if it's something you really haven't thought about, or are you very well prepared? And we just want to get a sense of the audience. We have a couple of hundred people here, so let's get at least 100 people if we can, sort of initially respond to this. But what we're seeing, and this is not a surprise to us, when you look at the business press or the general press, we've been hearing about this future of work, this coming robotic and AI age for quite some time everywhere in the world. And yet, about half the people in the room are telling us, and I appreciate people for being honest, that's a great thing, you can just plug into your phone what the right answer is for you, is that we're actually not prepared for the future that's coming. Right? And I think one of our challenges is to be prepared. All right, let's flip back to the presentation. And we'll share this data with you as well. There are 7 things that are going on. I'm going to cover these 7 things in about 7 minutes. Right? Now, one of the things that I think is unique about the way that we're thinking about the future of work, and that we would ask you to think about it from the perspective of HR, is to recognize that the future of work is about 3 different things that are going on at the same time. Right? It's about what's going on in terms of technology. It's what's going on in terms of different ways that we can access and mobilize the workforce. We'll come back to this. And it's about changes in the workplace and workspaces themselves. The future of work is not only about AI. Right? AI is a major component of it. We're going to come back to this. The challenge that we're seeing as we're working with companies and governments around the world is to really take some sort of integrated view. So how do we start with that? We start by recognizing that there are 7 disruptors. Now I want to tell you that this is a presentation, this is the first time I've made this presentation in India. So when you see slides and you say, that's an interesting picture, that's a picture of an Indian, it's not the presentation that I've created for you. This is the global presentation. So the first thing that we talk about is that technology is everywhere. Right? And we've seen in India the incredible growth of 4G and mobile data over the last couple of years. The growth in sensors, the growth increasingly now we're seeing in these personal assistants that we have at home, Alexa, Google Now, on the Apple Pod, where we're actually talking with our computers. Clearly we have to start by recognizing the pervasiveness and the accelerating pace of technologies that are coming in, right? So when I think of technology being everywhere, what I would ask you to think about are a couple of things. One is, we just have massive amounts of computing power, right? Number 2 is, we can access that computing power almost anywhere, right? And that's what, when we say cloud and connectivity and mobile, think that we have enormous computing power, it's getting less and less expensive, Moore's law, right? And we can access that power anywhere in the world from a device in our pocket or on our wrist, right? We're wearing them. The second is, and we talk about data all the time, right? But what's significant for us as HR leaders is this. With massive computing power and massive amounts of data, machines can now do something that they never did before in history. Machines do something that we describe as learning and thinking. All right? And without the computing power and the cloud, and without the massive amounts of data, machines cannot learn. Right? So the relevance for one piece of relevance for us in thinking about the future of work, the future of workforces is, with all this computing power that's available at our fingertips, and with all this data, which machines can process incredibly fast, right? Machines can do this thing that looks like learning. And I think one of the challenges for us as HR leaders is, what does it mean when machines can learn? What does it mean when machines can do things that we thought previously only people could do? And I'll come back to that. The third piece is clearly the growth of AI and computing and cognitive technologies themselves, right? Which is the result of this massive computing power and this data that's out there. And what we're seeing now is an incredibly quick drop in the cost of AI and cognitive technologies, where they're becoming much more present in the workplace. The fourth driver is the one that I think captures the headlines all the time, the very famous Oxford study that Osborne and Frey did in 2013, where they talked about the fact that jobs are vulnerable to automation. Okay, and again, I would ask you to think about it in a slightly different way, right? It's, in my mind, it's not that our jobs are vulnerable to automation. It's that we have new possibilities in the workforce because of what people and machines can do together. And we'll come back to that. The last three disruptors to think about. The workforce is as diverse globally, ethnically, culturally, and in terms of generations that it's ever been before. So I have some good news and bad news, right? The good news is that the millennials are now the predominant generation in the workforce. And I won't ask you to raise your hand if you're a millennial, because I think almost everybody here is a millennial. I'm not, I'm a boomer, right? But I also like to remind everybody that everybody who's a boomer, we were once millennials too, right? There's always been a younger generation, and there will always be a younger generation. So now the millennials are making way for Generation Z, right? And I don't know who comes after Generation Z. Have we figured out what we're going to call it after that? I guess we're going to go back to Alpha. We'll start all over again in another alphabet, right? But one of the things that's very interesting to us is that the workforce and we as humanity are living longer lives, right? We call this the longevity dividend, right? There's an author at MIT who talks about the longevity economy. And what's interesting is that as our lives get longer, our careers get longer, right? And so we have a degree of generational diversity that we've never had before. I was with a major bank, a global bank in the US, a couple of weeks ago talking about this, and they were showing me, we talked about longevity, they were showing me pictures of people that had worked at this bank for 60 years. All right, and so that's the good news and the bad news. What does it mean? We're HR leaders. How do we create 60-year careers, right? You live to be 100 years old, God willing. A career is 60 years. The average time in a job is 4 years. The average half-life of a learned skill, like a computer language, is 5 years. So as my colleague Josh Burson and I joke, so do the math. 60-year career, 4 years in a job, 5 years for a domain learned skill. That's 12 careers in a lifetime. What's our job? Our job is reinvention. And it's our job as HR leaders to create the environment in which that's going to happen, right? So we're going to have longer lives, and we're going to ask our question, what does a career look like in that period of time? The last disruptor is the explosion in contingent work, right? The fastest growing part of the labor force in almost every country in the world is a category that statistically labor ministries used to call other. Right? We now call it in some countries alternative workforce arrangements, right? And so the challenge is, how do we lead and develop work and workforces where the fastest growing part of the workforce are not full-time employees or part-time employees, they're contractors, freelancers, gig workers, and crowd workers. And how do we as HR leaders develop policies and programs and strategies where we are integrating all the different kinds of workers, right? And as one of my colleagues, David Brown from Australia, describes it, and it's an interesting expression, as we lead the workforce, we need to lead what David calls hot bodies, warm bodies, and cold bodies. Hot bodies are our employees. They work in our buildings, they work on our campuses, they work in our factories. right? There are full-time and part-time employees. Warm bodies is contingent labor in any form. Could be somebody who does a job that looks like Ola, or somebody whose job is working in the crowd. Or it could be a cold body, and I don't mean to be critical of our machine colleagues, right? But machines are not warm or hot-blooded, they're cold. But the point is that we have to lead a workforce that has people and machines both as part of the workforce, right? These are the 7 disruptors. I'm going to skip this section because I wanted to focus on 1 or 2 other key concepts. So the second question we'd like you to do, if you can go back to slido.com, Deloitte Future of Work, and can we switch over to the next question, which is, as you think about your current career and learning programs, how well prepared are you for the kind of future that we're just beginning to describe? A future where there are, omnipresent technologies, wearable technologies, data that's being used for machines to learn, the growth of AI and cognitive solutions, this diverse and generationally eclectic group of people working for us, this explosion of contingent work. All right, so we have about 90 people responding, a little better response than the first question, so you're getting warmed up, which is good. But about 46% are saying that you're unprepared. About 30%, 3 out of 10 are saying they're prepared. Well, and about 13% have said you haven't even started. You haven't even started looking at your career and learning programs relative to this headline trend. Let's flip back to the presentation. Okay, thank you. There are 4 things that I'd like to cover in the next, 5 minutes or so, and then hopefully we'll have just a couple of minutes for questions, right? And these are the sort of 4 core concepts that we use to frame the discussion around what we're doing in the future of work. But let me start by asking the second key question, right? The first key question I'm asking you to sort of take away as homework, right, is what is our narrative in my company on the future of work? Where are we going? The second question is recognizing that as HR leaders, at the very least, you have 2 fundamental roles in the future of work. One role is you need to lead the future of work in the HR function itself. What does this future of people and machines and alternate workforces and alternate workplaces, what does that mean for us in HR? And obviously, how can we lead and refine and in some ways disrupt what we're doing so that we're not simply putting a digital veneer, a digital layer on what we're doing, but that we're really taking advantage and using the disruptive power of AI, cognitive, new talent models, and new ways that we can work in different locations. How are we creating, and I don't want to speak about, what's a 1x improvement in HR productivity? 1x improvement is 100% improvement, right? Can you double your business in customer value and revenue with the same headcount in HR? Right? If you could do that, that would be a 100% increase. Right? That's the kind of challenge that we need to put to ourselves. But that's only one role that we have in the future of work. We also have a role to work with the CEO, the managing directors, the CFO, and every functional leader on helping them create future of work roadmaps to redesign the workforce, and the workplaces in every part of the company. Right? So I'd really like you to take away that dual challenge, right? And say, the second question is, what can I do to lead the future of work in my function, HR? And what can I do to lead the future of work throughout the company so I'm driving as much significant change as I can? 4 key concepts. First one is, think of the workforce not as vulnerable, but as augmented. How can we augment the workforce? And there's sort of 2 key ideas here. One is we're shifting the workforce from a hierarchical model and a functional model to a team-based model, right? The future of work will be about teams and networks and less and less about functional bureaucracies and silos, right? The second thing is who's on the team is changing, and we've already talked about it. The team will not just be our employees, but the teams will also be third-party contingent labor, contingent workers, often contingent workers who are doing the most value-added activities in our company. People say, well, how can that be, right? Much R&D going forward will be done by networks and teams and not by the people that we hire to do R&D in our own company. Right? Bill Joy, one of the founders of Sun Microsystems, summarized it this way. There are always going to be more smart people outside your company than inside your company. You lead HR, how can you take advantage of the smart people outside as well as the smart people inside? And also the team is going to involve both people, employees, but also machines. The second key point, and I think in some ways this is the sort of one of the key insights that we've had in navigating the future of work, right? It's not only about AI, but AI is a big piece. So we fundamentally think that there are 3 questions that you need to be asking in an integrated way, right? We call this the what, the who, and the where of the future of work, right? What work that you are doing, what business outputs that you're creating can be done by machines, any kind of machine, physical robotics, knowledge robotics, cognitive solutions, AI solutions, right? And then the flip side of that question is, if this is the work that can be done by machines, what is the work that we need to do that can only be done by people, right? And this is the third, and I'm only going to have 3, sort of fundamental question to ask as an HR leader, which is, in my industry and in my business, if I understand what technology can do, and it's not a once and done, you cannot future-proof your organization, right? Because it's not something we're going to do one time. We have to constantly be future-proofing our organization. The third question is, what are the essential and enduring skills, human skills, that we need in my industry and my company, right? And companies that understand those essential human skills and how people and machines will work together, we believe will be the most successful and will also create the most highly energized and productive workforces. The what question. The who question, who can do that work? And if I look across all the different possibilities of the workforce, how do I access, again, as Bill Joy said, how do I make sure I'm accessing people that want to work for me on my campus, in my building, in my factory, and people that have no interest in doing that as well? And the third question is the where question, right? Where can and might the work be done? How do we use distributed campuses? How do we work in real time between Bangalore and Boston, something that we've been doing? But how do we also layer into that some of the collaborative technologies that are out there? Slack, Facebook at Work, things like that. So we're using them real time. How do we integrate VR and AR? And AR is the one, augmented reality and HoloLens and Google Glass and the versions of that are ones that we're very excited about. How do we integrate those technologies in? The where of work. How do we use space and distance in new ways? I'm not going to go through it now, and we'll share this material with you, but for each one of these questions, I'll say there's a double click, right? And what we'd like to challenge you to think about is, as an HR leader, right, am I up to speed, and how do I get my team up to speed to understand this whole range of technologies, RPA, cognitive, AI, analytics, digital platforms, digital reality, the role of device and sensors in the Internet of Things, the role of robotics, by which we mean physical robotics. When you hear terms like NLG, natural language generation, or NLP, natural language processing, or machine learning, ML, or DL, deep learning, as I was talking about with my friend Vaibhav from Reliance last night, do we know what these ideas are and how people and technology can work together? That needs to be on our agenda. I can think of no more fundamental question for a SHRM Tech conference than this question, right? The other continuum is the continuum of what we call the open talent economy, right? From on-balance sheet to off-balance sheet, from full-time employees to crowd workers. And then the third, as we've already talked about, is where can that work be done? From working in the same physical location to hybrid locations to having organizations where nobody is sitting in the same place and all the work is being done virtually. A couple of final points, because we're running out of time. I know we started a little bit late. One of the challenges for us as HR leaders is to understand the implications of this for individuals, our workers, and for our business, and the society and the public policy implications as well. And again, it's part of it. I'm going to finish up by highlighting what we think are, and I've given you the 3 homework questions, but these are the strategic questions to review with your leadership colleagues, right? Another way to look at it is just 3 chapters that we would ask you to consider when you're looking at the future of work. The first question, of course, is what is our future digital strategy? Okay? And I don't mean for HR, I mean for your entire company, right? What does it mean to use digital and new technologies to change the way we work? If you're in banking, right, we know that branch banking will look very, very different 3 to 5 years from now because of the advent of technology. So the question is, what does the branch of the future look like? What does retail banking look like? And as you understand that in financial services, what does that mean for our workforce? So chapter 1 is having a vision with the business leaders on what our business is going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. The second chapter is having your point of view on the what, the who, and the where of the future of work. Okay? For my business, when I think about where the business is going, what the digital future is like, what the business models are like, do I have an answer to these 3 questions? And then the third chapter for us in HR are all of the organization and leadership and talent and employee experience implications of that. If I have a digital strategy that says X, and I have a future of work strategy that says this is the what, the who, and the where of my workforce, right? How do I organize myself to get that done? What impact does that have on organizational structure and behavior? How do I develop leaders and managers to work in a digital age where most of the work is done by people and machines working together, and many of those people are not my employees? How do I develop and train people? What do careers and talent models look like if I'm running a digital strategy with a digital workforce? How do I change that? And as you've said earlier, when we asked the question, about 47% said that your career and learning programs weren't ready for that, right? And then finally, how do I create a workforce experience? And we'll end with this point. We're not talking about employee experience, right? Employee experience is not enough. When the bulk of your workforce can be people who are not traditional employees, right? We need to find a way to create a great experience for every person who in some way is contributing to the success of what we're doing in our business. So these are the 3 chapters. That's what we wanted to share with you today. We're going to end with one final polling question, and I think this will also keep us going. Can we go to the final polling question? And the final polling question, and hopefully the technology works, I think it will, is if you could focus on one thing today to meet the challenges of the future of work, and we're asking you to put in either 1 or 2 words, not a whole sentence or a paragraph. If you want to write a whole paragraph, I don't know how it's going to come up here, so you can try that, right? But 1 or 2 words, what are the key things that you think you need to focus on? And what you begin to see already is the emergence of a word cloud. Learning, and the 2 biggest seem to be learning or learn and technology. With that, I know that we're out of time. I know we started a little bit late. I'll ask our SHRM Tech colleagues if we have any time for questions. We appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. I'll end where I began. I can think of no more interesting time and interesting place to be looking at the future of work and the intersection of technology and people than India at the SHRM Tech Conference here in Hyderabad. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schwartz. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.